Welcome to Geo-Logos. I'm Samantha Corcoran, and I will be your tour guide today as we follow along on Abraham's journey through the book of Genesis. Abraham lived in ancient Mesopotamia, so on our tour today, that's where we are starting. We're going to the continent of Asia, and you'll see Saudi Arabia here in the middle of your screen with the Red Sea is that big body of water on the lower left, and we're going to zoom in to what is now modern-day Iraq. That's where Abraham grew up and lived for a portion of his life, and he lived in the city of Ur. Now, there are still ruins there today, and so when we zoom in, we can see some of the monuments that are there, and this first one is the Great Ziggurat of Ur. Now, you may remember the Tower of Babel story. They had a ziggurat as well. So here in Abraham's hometown, they had a ziggurat, and someone creatively made a Google SketchUp model that we can go visit in Street View. So I am taking the little guy and dropping him right in front of this monument. And in Street View, you can use your arrow keys and turn and go up and sideways and around to explore these fun little models. So this is the Great Ziggurat of Ur. Now just down the street is another famous site called the House of Abraham, and we'll go there now. Again, here's an informational box. You can always click on these at your leisure. Learn more about the site. You can see pictures, videos, timelines. This particular one connects to the ancient encyclopedia, ancient history encyclopedia. Some of them connect to Wikipedia. But again, it's just an informational box for you to learn more. So we'll head back to Google Earth here and take a look again at Abraham's trip. So again, he started in what is modern-day Iraq. Then he traveled to Harran. Harran is in modern-day Turkey. He probably followed a trade route along the Euphrates River to get north up to Harran. And you can see the stark contrast in the terrain. We're not in a desert area in Harran. Lots of lush farm ground around here. Abraham's journey continued southwest. He probably passed Damascus. Now, it doesn't tell us exactly in chapter 12, but we do know that in chapter 15 it mentions his servant Eleazar from Damascus. It was along the trade route. Damascus is one of the oldest cities on earth, so it's most likely he passed by. He also would have passed by Mount Gerizim. This is the holiest site for Samaritans. It is near the city of Nablus today. That's the city you see at the foot of Mount Gerizim. In Bible times, this town was called Shechem. So pretty prominent in the Old Testament, Shechem was, and it's still there today. In fact, the tomb of Joseph is in this city. So we'll save that for another video. Abraham continued on his journey. He continued south. He set up camp in between Bethel and Ai, and this city that we are zooming into right now, Beitin, is modern-day Bethel. And you can see the terrain goes from rocky, hilly, and suddenly drops off as it gets down into the Jordan River Valley there on the right side of your screen. But just a couple miles south is Jerusalem. So Abraham was very near Jerusalem, although it was not called that during his time. So he continues his journey farther south into the Negev desert, which is a desert. You can see the terrain here on Google Earth. It looks pretty stark, although there is a lot of beauty in a desert. And Abraham found some, most likely in the town of Beersheba. So we'll zoom in there. There's actually a monument for Abraham's well in this city. This city is pretty bustling. You can even see some skyscrapers there. So if you want to go through this model on your own, you can go into Street View and explore those. Remember, there was a famine in chapter 12, which took Abraham and his family down to Egypt. Now, we don't know exactly where it was in Egypt, so I just put Cairo here as the center of the map. Once that was done, Abraham heads back past the Negev, and then he ends up at the great trees of Mamre. Now, this was a Canaanite sacred site, and there was probably one very large giant tree that they would have sacrificed at ancient pagan sacrifices. But this was a location that was along route at the time, and so lots of people would have known about it and used it as a landmark. The next landmark that we're headed to is not too far away. This is in modern-day Hebron. You're looking at the Cave of the Patriarchs. And this is where Abraham and Sarah are buried. Remember, Abraham bought the field and buried Sarah here. He was later buried when he died. And this is the second most important site in Judaism today. So this ends Abraham's journey here in the land of Canaan in the book of Genesis. He traveled nearly 2,000 miles by the time he was finished, and probably even more than that. So I hope this tour has given you some perspective on his journey and how far he went from Ur of the Chaldeans in modern-day Iraq up to Harran, Turkey, and down into the land of Canaan. If you've liked what you've seen here today on Google Earth, please subscribe. I've also got more links below. I'm Samantha Corcoran. Thanks for watching. Remember to let the Word open up your world.